Okay. Bezos Hashem, today's daf is daf Lamed Tes, and we are holding on a very easy Gemara, interesting and easy Gemara to follow. On daf Lamed Ches, Lamed Beis, about like 5 lines from the bottom. The Gemara says like this: Amar Abaye, we're talking about the rape and the mafata and the seduction, ma'aynis and mafata, right? So if you do that, you have to pay 50 shekel. Amar Abaye said, Ba'aleha, a guy did the act of ma'anas, a woman, he raped her, and so he has to pay the 50 shekel. But what happened was, before they went to court, umesa, she died. Potter, you're not obligated to pay. Interesting. You got away with it later. Why? Shenema, because the pasuk is specific. V'nosam, you give the 50 shekel la'avi hanara, to the father of the girl. But she has to be alive to be called the girl. V'loi la'avi mesa, but not to the father of the dead girl. So if she died, you don't have to pay. Gemara says, Milsa de pshita le'labaya miboy le'lerava. This thing is a simple message, a simple halacha to Abaya. Rava was not so sure. Now, Rava is going to argue on Abaya. He's going to hold, for the most part, Rava is holding that if she died, you still have to pay. You know, just because she's dead, you still have to pay the father the money. That's clear. And I want to tell you something else, that even if, let's say she didn't die, let's say a person was mazana with ma'anas, a katana, right, or a nara, you didn't get to court. So normally you pay the 50 shekel to the father. But let's say you didn't get to court until after she became a begeris. The halacha is, what is the halacha? If she became an adult, you pay the money to her, not to her father. Okay? If you only went to court after she became an adult, you have to pay the money back to her, not to her father. The Gemara Rava asked this fantastic question. Rava asked the question, let's say she died as a nara. She died as a 12-year-old girl. So would you say, let's say the court case happened a year later. Did she become an adult in the grave or not? The Boya Rava, yesh beger bekever. Is there an adult? Do you become an adult in the grave? Or ein beger bekever? Or you don't become adult in the grave? Because yesh beger, what's the nafkamina? So yesh beger bekever. If she becomes an adult in the grave, that really the knas really should belong to her, right? Because if the court case happens after, if she would have been alive, she would have been over 12 and a half. So she would be able to get the knas for herself. Now that she's not alive, we give it to her son. Now, where does she have a son? Let's say she got this rape happened when she was 10 years old, okay? And then afterwards, when she was 11 years old, she had a child. Then from Maznus, so she has a child. And then she died. But when she would have been 14, that's when the court case started. Do we say that she would have been a 14-year-old girl now, and therefore you would give instead of, if she would have been alive, you give the knas to herself. But now we're going to give it to her son. Or maybe ein bega bekever. We don't say she becomes an adult in the grave. We always view her as a nara, as a katana or nara, and she doesn't age in the grave. And really, udaviyahava, and the knas belongs to her father. Okay, so that's what Rava asks. So this part, Rava holds that even if she died, there's knas here. The question is, do you give it to her or her son? Obviously, she's dead. Or do you give it to her father? So that's predicated on, like I gave you the example, that she had this rape happen when she was 10 years old, and she had a child at 11. So at 11 years old. So now the Gemara asks that obvious question: how is it possible for a girl to have a child, younger than 12? Abra, can a woman become pregnant under 12? Rabbi taught this Bryce in front of Rab Nachman. We have this. 3 women are allowed to use, let's say, a contraceptive or something like that to wash out after the bia. Actually, we advise her to make sure that she takes the after pill, in order she should not become pregnant. We don't want them to become pregnant. And it's not considered like you're destroying the seed, which is a big avera, because it's dangerous for her to become pregnant. Which three women is it dangerous for them to become pregnant? So the Gemara says the three women that are dangerous to become pregnant is Eluhain, Ketana, a girl who's not yet 12, Mubaris, a girl that's pregnant, Umeinika, or a nursing woman. What's wrong with these women becoming pregnant? And we encourage them to use like a contraceptive or do whatever they can to take the pill not to become pregnant. Kitana, if she's under 12, Shemet is aber, because we're afraid if she becomes pregnant, the Talmud, she's going to die. Mu'uberes, if she's pregnant already, so we don't want her to become pregnant again, so to speak. Shemet is tasa ubara sandal. Maybe she'll make her fetus to look like a fish, like a flat stingray, like a flat face, because there's going to be like another kid coming in there. I don't know how it works, but it's going to crush the formation of the original fetus. Meinika, a woman who is nursing a baby, we don't want her to become pregnant. Shema tigmal esbanal. She's going to wean her child. In other words, if she becomes pregnant, the milk that she's nursing her child will become spoiled, and therefore the baby is in danger of dying. She has no food. Now the Gemara says, the Brisa says, "Be'ezehi ketana," what is called a young girl. The bas esras, that we don't want them to become pregnant. Bas achas esrei shana v'yam echad ach shteim esrei shana v'yam echad, from under 11. From 11 to 12 years old. That's a ketana. We don't want her to become pregnant, because if she does become pregnant, she can die. Now, here's the key word, pachas mikain. If she's less than 11 years old, don't use the contraceptives, because it's impossible for her to become pregnant. The yeser kain, and more than 12 years old, if she does become pregnant, nothing's going to happen to her. Mishameshes kedarka vaylecha. She can have relations and let it go, everything go naturally. Divrei Rab Meir, so says the words of Rab Meir. Chachamim say no. It's not for sure that if she becomes pregnant after 11 years old, she's going to die. So we say that she should not use the contraceptive when she's a katana. God will have mercy on her. She shouldn't be part of that tiny statistic that if she's an 11-year-old and becomes pregnant, she's going to die. Because we rely on this pasuk, Shomer Pesoyim Hashem. God looks out for people who are not careful on their own life. But anyway, the point of the bringing this all in is that we see that it's impossible for a girl under 11 years old to have a child. So if that's the case, how is it possible for this girl who was nenas, she got raped? How is it possible for her to have a child that if she died, that the knas should go to her child? Would you want to say the abra kashihinara, va'ilida kashihinara? That means she became pregnant at 12 years old, and she had at 6 months later, she had a child at a nara. In other words, we want her to die before she becomes an adult, because if she became an adult, of course, the knas belongs to her, never to the father. But so we have a situation, she became pregnant at 12 years old, and the child was born right when she became 12 and a half years old. So the Gemara says, is it possible after 6 months a child could be born? Shmuel says, between naras and adulthood, between a teenager and becoming an adult is only 6 months, 12 years to 12 and a half. And we know a woman needs to carry more than 6 months to have a baby. So it's impossible for her to have a child. So the Gemara says, would you want to say, B'tzurhu deleka, less than that, it's impossible for her to have a child. B'tzurhu deleka, I'm sorry, less than that is not called, is the 6th month. Hatfeika, it's possible to become a bagris, let's say at the age of 13, not at the age of 12 and a half. Maybe that's what Shmuel says. The minimum was 6 months. So the Gemara says that's not true. Ha'ela kama. Shmuel was precise in his expression. He says naris, and the time difference between becoming a nara and bagrus is 6 months. That means if she has 2 years at 12 years old, 6 months later, precisely 6 months later, she is an adult. So it's impossible to have more than a 6-month period between Maris and Bagris. So in other words, the question gets back to, so what was the original shaila of if she has a child, will the knas belong to her? It's impossible in all situations for an oinus to have a child. If she had a child, it's impossible if she had it below 11. And even during 11 and a half and 12, it's a danger. She can die. And after 12, you only have till 12 and a half for her to have a child, and there's too little time left. So Elahachi Kami Baile, this was the original Kshaila of Rava. Yesh Bega B'Pekever. Do we say that this girl becomes an adult in the grave? In other words, she died when she was a Nara. Now, the court case happened to decide of the oinus, and if she would have been alive, she would have been an adult. But now she's not around. So would we say that she became an adult in the grave, upoka av? Now the father cannot collect the money. Oidilma, or do we say, ain bagabakeva? We don't look at her as getting older in the grave. V'loipoka av, and the father's rights are not removed. In other words, that even if the court case happens many years later, since at the time of death she was a 12-year-old, and as a 12-year-old the knas belongs to her father, he would still get the knas. That was the question. The other question is Marbar of Ashi boile hachid. Marbar of Ashi had the question like this. Misa oisa bagus. It was exactly what Abaya said. The fact that she died, does that make her an adult, and therefore there is no knas because she's not here, and therefore she's not here to collect. So who are you going to pay? Nobody. Father not, and she not. Maybe it doesn't turn her into an adult, and therefore she's always viewed as an ara, and you would pay the father. Teku, that is the question. And because based on Marbar of Ashi's expression, that was the question of Rava. Whether if the girl dies, is there kanas at all or not? New Gemara. Baya mine Rava ma Abaya. Rava asked the question from Abaya. Ba aleha v'nis arso. Let's say a woman, you came on her, and then she became engaged. Now, when a girl gets engaged, her father loses rights to her, because we see that when it comes to vows, normally when she didn't become engaged, her father can nullify any vow she makes. He's like full control. Now that she got engaged to somebody, the father now has a partner here, the husband, the new potential husband. So the question is like this: who is going to get the right of her knas? So Ba'ala, she was raped, let's say at 10 years old. Vinis Arsanjan, she got engaged. Now we're going to court to make the guy that raped her pay, and who's going to get the knas? Or is there knas? Amalei, so Abaya answered Rava, Mi Kesiv, does the pasuk say, V'nosan la'abi hanara ashaloi arusa? Does the pasuk say that you give the knas to the father of the girl that did not yet get engaged? The Torah doesn't say that. So it doesn't matter if she got engaged. You'll always, since the Torah doesn't specify that, the Torah implies that you'll always give it over to her, no matter what. To the father. You always give the knas to the father, even if she got engaged. So the Gemara says, so that was Abaya's answer to Rava. So Rava asks back to Abaya, Ultaimech, according to your logic, Tanya, if we learned in a Brisa, Ba'aleh Benisis, let's say she didn't get engaged, she got actually married. The Brisa says, Latzma. Then, if they went to court and she really got married, then you give it to totally her and it belongs to her husband. The father has no rights. Why? Miksiv, does the pasuk say v'nosan labi anayra shaloi nusua, that you give it to the father on condition that her daughter did not get married? Doesn't matter. Torah doesn't say that. The Torah says always give it to the father. So why is it if she actually got married, went to chuppah, she gets to keep it? So the Gemara. So in other words, what's the difference between if they just have erusin and just had marriage? So the Gemara. So Abaye answered, Hachi hashta. How can you compare? Hasam over there, hoyel ubagros motzia mershus av. If she became an adult, her father has no rights to her, right? Everything, that a girl who becomes an adult, every knas and everything that she's supposed to get belongs to her. She's out of the jurisdiction of her father. And the nisuin, if she got married, even if she's not an adult yet, let's say she got married at 11 years old, right? Her father married her off. Now she's no more in the jurisdiction of the father. She's now under the jurisdiction of her husband. Ma bagras, just like natural adulthood, ba'aleha ubagra. Let's say someone was mazana with her, raped her when she was a katana, and then she became an adult, and then they went to court. La'atzma, she gets to keep it. Af nisuin, so also by marriage. Ba'aleh, someone was ma'anis her. Then he says and got married, and she got married. La'atzma, she gets to keep it. But that's if she actually got married and went to chuppah. Ela erisin, but by erisin, if she just got engaged to somebody, did she actually release and totally leave the father's jurisdiction? Just when a girl gets engaged, she's not totally out of the father's jurisdiction, because hatna, we learned in the Mishnah, nara hamoras, a girl that got engaged, the father and husband are both partners to nullify any vows she makes, so that she's still in the jurisdiction of her father. So the question is, does he still have the right to get the knas? And the answer is yes. If she got married, she went to chuppah, he doesn't get the knas. But since even if she got engaged, the father would still get the knas, because the pasuk does not say give it to the father of the girl as long as she didn't get engaged. The Torah just plainly says give it to the father of the girl. That means that even if she didn't get engaged, we would give it to the father of the girl. New Mishnah. Hamafate, if the girl was seducted, right? Noisen shloisha devarim. You give 3 things, va'oinis arba. But if she was raped, she has to pay 4 payments. What are the 3 payments? Hamafate, if she was seduced, right? So then the seductor, Noisin, has to pay boishes, the embarrassment, because now everybody knows she had the relations out of wedlock, upagam, and the loss of value, because as a basula she's more desirable, uknas, and he has to pay the 50 shekel. Moisef olav oinis, but if somebody raped a girl, he's ma'anis a girl, he has to pay 1 more payment. Shenoisin esatzar, he has to pay the pain that he caused her. The pain that it caused her. And the Mishnah drives home the point. Ma bein oinis l'mafata. What's the difference if someone was ma'anis to somebody who is mafata, somebody who just seduced a girl, to ma'anis raped the girl? Oinis noisin is a tsar, ma'mafata inis a tsar. The oinis has to pay the pain that he caused her. And the Mishnah says, ha'oinis noisein miyad. The person that did this oinis has to pay it right away. Bahamafate, and the one that seduced her, likashiyotzi, when he divorces her. This part of the statement makes a little bit no sense, because just because he seduced her doesn't mean he married her. So what does this mean? We'll see what this means in the Gemara. Back into the Mishnah. Ha'oinis, as you know, the pasuk says that if you ma'anas a girl, you have to marry her, no matter what she looks like. He has to drink from basically his urine cup. Basically, no matter how she looks, we'll see what that means. He has to marry her. Ma'amafate, but if he only seduced her, she wasn't raped, then imratz lahaitzi, might see if he wants to, divorce her, he could divorce her. He doesn't have to stay with her forever. Ketzat shoises be'atzitza. When do we see a ma'anis has to drink his urine cup? Afili hi chigeres, even if she's a limping person. Afili hi suma, even if she's blind. Afili hu mukashchin, or if she has boils. In other words, she's extremely unattractive. Then he still has to marry her, and he can never divorce her. But nimsa ba devar erva. But let's say she was mizana, right? Let's say she was mizana while she was married to him, right? Or let's say she became, or she is somebody that he could not marry. Let's say she's a mamzeres. He's not allowed to stay with her. The pasuk says, when you're ma'anis a girl, when the guy is ma'anis, the Torah says for him, she should be for him a wife. It means isha ru'ilay. It has to be an appropriate wife min haTorah that he could stay married to her. But if she did something, or she's an erva, or she's a mamzeres, so it's not a woman that he can potentially stay with, he doesn't have to marry her. Now the Gemara asks like this fabulous question, and it's hard to understand. The Gemara understands that the Mishnah said that when you ma'anis, a woman, you raped her, you have to pay an additional payment called tsar. The tsar is the pain you caused her. So the Gemara says, tsar demai, what kind of pain did you cause her? Amar Avu de Shmuel, so the father of Shmuel says, tsar shechavot al gabe karka. It's the tsar that you raped her by throwing her to the ground. That pain of throwing her down, that's the pain that we're looking for him to pay. So the Gemara says that makes no sense. Maskif lo Rab Zera asked the question, Elameata, if according to that logic, if someone raped a girl, but chavot al gabe shiroy and hachanami depota, if he threw her onto a soft mattress, would he be potter because he's not throwing her down? You're right. If he was ma'anis her on top of a mattress, he wouldn't have to pay tsar. But Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Shimon ben Yehuda, who says, Mishum Rabbi Shimon, Oynes Einem Mishalem Es Atzar. A person who's ma'anis rapes doesn't pay pain. Rabbi Shimon holds never. There's no such a tsar. B'pnei, we go to Amud Beis. B'pnei shesoifa lehitz ta'er tachas bala, because she's going to have the same tsar when she's under her husband. What's the tsar pashtus he's talking about? She's going to lose. She has the pain of losing her dam basulam. So Reb Shimon held that he doesn't pay that because she's eventually going to lose the dam basulam when she actually gets married. So it's a pain that's inevitable to come. So therefore, Reb Shimon held you don't have to pay that. But they told him, you can't compare somebody who loses their virginity, basulim, when it's by force, to somebody it happened beratzoin that she's okay with it. She's with her husband. So that's why you have to pay tsar. So what you see from this brisa is that it has nothing to do with throwing the girl down. That's not the tsar. The tsar is something else. The forced intercourse, that's the tsar. The force of her losing her basulim and causing blood to flow, that's the tsar. And that's what he has to pay. Elo Amar Rav Nachman corrected himself. Amar Rabba Avua, tsar shapisik raglayim. It's not that. It's the tsar of a girl who's ma'anis, is nanas, is because she had to spread her feet, or she had to spread her legs, and it's very, very hard for her to do so. Even though if she's never done this before, it causes her to become Charlie horse for the first time. When the Navi wants to rebuke Klal Yisrael that they stray after any idol that comes their way, it uses the expression that you're like a zoina that spreads her legs to anybody that passes by. In other words, you follow every avodah zarah you want, like a zoina who spreads her legs. So we see that spreading the legs is involved, is an extra pain for somebody that's not used to it for this girl, and that is the tsar that you have to pay. So the Gemara says, if so, mafutanami. But doesn't a girl who was seduced also have that tsar? It's her first time of spreading her legs. What is that, a mafutas? If she's seduced, it's almost like she's like forgiving him. A man says to his friend, rip my suit and you wouldn't have to pay. So she's saying you can do whatever you want because she's like forgiving him for causing her this pain because she's seduced into it. So Gemara says, first of all, Shali, is it really her money that she's being Michael? The avu haninu, that's the pain. Any money that she's supposed to get really belongs to her father. So how can she be Michael and forgive something that doesn't even belong to her? Ella Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rav Abhua. What the Gemara is going to say is that a mefuta doesn't even feel the tsar. Why doesn't she feel the tsar of spreading her legs? Because she's the enjoyment of the relations makes her forget about that pain. But that only applies by a mafuta, but not by a ma'anis. Pikha shebehen oimris, the ones that are intelligent, who see things the way they are, will say mafuta ein la tsar, that someone who's seduced doesn't have tsar, even though it's a little difficult in the beginning, but she gets used to it, and the enjoyment of the act makes her forget of the pain. So the Gemara says, doesn't she? We see that she does have, she has pain when she does it for the first time, spreading her legs. Like I said, Amar Abaya, Amar Li, my mother told me that the example is Kamaya Chamima al Reisha de Karcha, hot water on a bald head. When a person's bald takes a hot shower, the first drops that hit his head, he's very uncomfortable. It causes him like a sting, but then he gets used to it. Same thing over here. The first act that she's going to do, it's a little uncomfortable, but then during the act she gets used to it, like a person taking a shower, a bald person taking a shower. Rava had this discussion with his wife, and she gave her another example. Amali Basra of Chizda, the daughter of Chizda, my wife told me, Kirivda de Silta. It's like when a person gets needled to bloodlet. After the bloodletting, you're going to feel great. It's almost like cupping or whatever they call it, massaging. It's difficult, but then it feels good. So therefore, that's what it is for Mafuta to have the tsar. She has tsar, but it's she gets used to it, and she's not really tsar. Rapapa said, Amali Bas Abasura, my wife Abasura told me, Ki Nahama Akusha Bechincha. When you eat hard bread that like scrapes your throat, you enjoy the bread because it's crusty bread and it tastes good, but it's hard to swallow. So the same thing over here. In the beginning, as she begins the act of spreading her raglayim, it's tsar, but as soon as she's into it, she doesn't even think about the tsar because she enjoys the tashmish. But that only applies by mafuta. That's why mafuta doesn't play tsar, but oinus does pay tsar. One more piece of Gemara. Ha'oinus noisim yad mafate l'kashiyotzi. So the Mishnah said that an oinus pays the money right away, but a mafata when he divorces her. Wait a minute. If he seduced her, he's not even married to her. So what do you mean? When he divorces her, that's when he has to pay the knas? L'kashiyotzi ishtahi, it's his wife. He just had snus with her. Amar Abaya said, you have to say lichishaloyichnois. If he never ended up marrying her, then he pays the knas. In other words, if a person was ma'anis, raped a girl, even if he marries the girl, he has to pay the father all those payments. But a mafuta, if he decides to marry her, then he doesn't pay the knas. He doesn't pay the knas. He just marries her and doesn't have to pay knas. Tanya name haki, we learned in the brayso. Afa pisha amru, even though we say hamafata noisin lichishaloyichnois, hamafata pays the 50 shekel when he decides not to marry her. He pays embarrassment and loss of value right away. So after this situation, we give him a period of time. Do you want to marry her? And up until the wedding or whatever, if he decides that he's going to marry her, the 50 shekel he doesn't have to pay, but he has to pay the boishes subagam, the embarrassment and the loss of value right away. The echad oinus. Now the Mishnah, the brayso says something interesting. Who can uphold this marriage? Who can say that I don't want this marriage? The echad oinus, the echad mefata. Whether it's an oinus and whether it's a mefata situation, bein avia yechoy la'akin. She can say I don't want to marry him, and her father can say I don't want my daughter to marry him. So the Gemara says like this: Bishlama yimefuta. I understand very well if she's seduced. There, the Torah seems to give clear, power to the father to refuse the marriage. Ksiv, the pasuk says, "Imoyin yemoyin avia." If the father refused, and it says imoyin, so the double refusal. So it's not only she can refuse, but the father can also refuse. That's what he says. Ainli elavia. I only see that the father confused. He asks Memenayin, Tamalome Yamain. Whoever refuses, that's a good refusal. She can refuse. Mikal Makam. Ela Oinis, if she was raped, Bishlama Ihi. I understand the girl herself. She can say, I don't want to marry this guy. Ksiv Veloisia. She has to want. It's for him, she should be a wife. He has to be to her as a wife. So the pasuk implies that she makes the decisions. Midata, she has to agree with the marriage. Ella avia menalan. How do you know that the father of a nanas has the right to refuse the marriage? Amar Abaya says, Shloye niska. We don't want him to be a sinner and gain from it. In other words, what do you mean? If she was not nanas, if nothing happened to the girl, who gets the right to marry her off? The father. So now that he raped her, ma'anas her, it means you're taking away the rights to the father to say you can marry my daughter against my will. It can't be. It must be that the father has also rights to refuse this marriage. Rava says, Kal v'chomer, I could just figure it out myself. Someone who seduced a girl, only the father was disagreeable. She agreed to be seduced. So the father was very angry on the situation. But we still see the Chumash says, Bein hi bein aviyah chayil akib, whether it's her, whether her father could stop the marriage. Oinis, if someone was ma'anas a girl, the guy went against the will of the father and the will of herself. He was ma'anas her. Like Kolshkin, of course the father has the right to refuse the marriage. Rava la'ama kambaya. Why didn't Rava say like Abaya's reason? Shloye chayte niska. So the Gemara says, Kaven the Komashal Knas, since anyway, the Ma'anis is paying a huge fine. He's paying Nezek, he's paying Tsar, Boishes, Pagam, and the 50 shekel. So Lav Choiteniskahu. You can't call him somebody who sins and is profiting. So it's not such a big reason why we can say that maybe the Torah said that he can decide the marriage, and if she's okay with it, the father, we don't involve the father's opinion over here. Abaya, like Amakarava, Abaya did not say like Rava, because he said like this: Mefata, by Mefata, which is if she was seduced, the Matzma Akev, Avia Nami Matzma Akev. If you look at the players over here, the guy that did the act, he could decide not to marry her. He's not forced to marry her. So therefore, the father can also stop the marriage. But Oinis, when it comes to Oinis, the Iloi Matzmakam, he cannot say, I don't want to marry her. The Torah says, but if you ma'anas a girl, you have to marry her. So I might have thought, the father can't also stop it. So therefore, Rava learned it from Abaya learned it from another reason, but the bottom line of what you walk away from here is, the one last line, is the bottom line is that when it comes to Oinis and Mefata, she has to want the marriage, and the father has to be agreeable that his daughter can marry this guy. By Oinis, we force him to marry. By Mefata, he has a choice if he wants to marry her. If he doesn't want to marry her, he has to pay the knas. One more piece, and then we'll stop. Tanya Idach, we learned in another brisa. Even though we said that if in Ma'anis, you have to pay all the payments right away and marry her. But when he divorces her, he doesn't have to pay anything. There is no ksuba payment because he already paid up everything prior to the marriage. So the Gemara says, Kishi when he divorces her, we just said, Mimatzi Mapikla. Can an oinis, someone who's ma'anis, a woman, decide he wants to divorce her? The Torah says you're stuck with this lady for the rest of your life. So how does that scenario play out? That if he divorces her, he doesn't have to pay ksuba. So Eima, we're going to say, Kishatetzehi. If she decides that she doesn't like the marriage and she wants to force him to give a get, Ein la olav klum, she has no claims against him, and she can't force him to pay a ksuba. Mace, even if he died, right? Yatzav Kasav Knasa B'Ksubasa. We don't go to his estate and pay a ksuba. The fact that he paid knas prior to the marriage, that was her ksuba. That's the 50 shekel. It turned out he gave it to her father and married her and stayed with him as long as he was alive. Comes along Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yosef says, no, even by an oinis, there is a ksuba. Yesh la ksuba mana. She gets a ksuba, a mana. A half, like a ba'ula, but she doesn't get a b'sula, but she has a ksuba. So, b'mai kami palgi. What's the argument? Why Rabbanan say there is no ksuba, and according to Rabbi Yosef Glili, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, there is a ksuba. Answers the Gemara, Rabbanan savre, Rabbanan whole time b'mai tekina Rabbanan ksuba. What's the reason why there is a ksuba? Even ksuba is the Rabbanan. So why did Rabbanan say the concept of ksuba? So it wouldn't be light to divorce a woman. If you know it's going to cost you a lot of money, so you're not going to you'll think twice before you're divorcing her. That's on a regular case. But the case of the ma'anis, the rape, like matzimapikla, the Torah says you're never allowed to divorce her. So therefore, there is no ksuba payment. Rabbi Yosef Yehuda Sava, Rabbi Yehuda says it's true that he can't on his own will decide to divorce her, but Hanami Mitzar Lo Ada Amrahi Lo Be'inalo. He can now force, cause her so much stress in the marriage that she's going to say, I don't want you. So he's going to sort of force it out of her to get that she should want the divorce. So in order for him not to, so it should be easy for him to get rid of his wife, we force him that if you're going to do something like that, you're going to have to pay a ksuba mana. So we learned here important machlekes is when a person's ma'anis a woman and we force him to marry her, is there a ksuba or not? According to Chachamim, there is no ksuba. According to Rabbi Yehuda, there is a ksuba. That's it.
Very interesting.